Welcome to another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought podcast, where we delve into the depths of parenting in ways that you might never have thought of before. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Okay, hello, Yeshaya Kraus LCSW. How are you?
Baruch Hashem. How are you, Boruch Menashe Adlin?
Baruch Hashem, very good. So I have to tell you that you have a very big part in actually making this podcast happen in the first place. I don't know if you remember, but there was some post that you posted, and I commented on it, and we said something like, "Oh, we should do a podcast together." And I had this idea swimming in my head for a while, and I said, "You know, that's it. I'm doing it." So this is in large part due to you. Thank you
We
for
linked
that.
up to and I'm glad that it actually took off. Like, I think there are a lot of things that people talk about that do not go anywhere. So I'm glad that this one took off.
Okay. So tell me first a little bit about like your work. Like, you think you're working in a school, you're working in private practice. Where were you seeing clients?
So it's been quite a journey. I have worked in schools in the past. There's like a bunch of yeshivas around Far Rockaway, excuse me, Queens, Brooklyn, that I've worked in with kids from, I think the youngest kid that I've actually worked with in a school is pre-1A, and I've worked with kids up till 12th grade. Right now, my primary focus is really on adults. One of the things that I did notice while working in school is that a lot of the times the work that you do with the kids is not even really the main event. It's the helping the parents figure out how to work with the kids. That's the main point. And I've seen this even like my first posting was in an outpatient clinic in Brooklyn. And that's one of the things that I would tell parents, that I have your kid 45 minutes a week. You have them the other, I'm not going to do the math, but you have them all the other minutes. So like a very big part of this is for the most part, parents learning how to help their kids through whatever it is that they're going through.
100%.
So right now I have private practice. I'm based in Far Rockaway. I'm actually speaking at my office right now. If you want, I can give you the grand tour.
Beautiful. I think for what we see of it, it looks very nice.
Yeah, no, Baruch Hashem. It's a good arrangement. Very short commute, and I also spend a few days in a clinic in Brooklyn, Rambam Family Health Center. I'm a therapist there. I'm a supervisor there, and
Okay, beautiful. So let me ask you like this. I'm going to start with this one. I have a bunch of questions for you. I want to see if we could get through all of them. As you know, I had made a post asking people on LinkedIn what they want to ask, and I, put together some of the things that we had interacted about and some of the questions from that post, and let's see what we can get through over here. So first, I want to ask you like this. You said teaching parents is obviously the most crucial part of teaching their children. You just mentioned, and the question is, what are we teaching parents? You had written in a post something to the extent of that the main thing is modeling behavior, that you won't be able to control your child, right? It won't even work. The main thing is to, allow you're sort of teaching them by osmosis to allow them to learn from your behavior, what the right thing and the wrong thing is to do, let's say. Now, I may be misquoting you. You'll correct me on that in a second. My question to you is teaching children unnecessary? Like, is the person just supposed to live his own life as he's supposed to be? He's going to be the best role model he could be, and then his children will just hopefully go along with that? Or does teaching have a place?
So I think that teaching does have a place. I mean, let's back up a second. There's one of the major influences on the way I look at Hashkafa in general was Rav Shlomo Wolbe and his farm. I never met him. I missed him by literally about a day. The day I got to yeshiva in the mirror was the day he stopped speaking there. So like I missed him literally the day. They had the poster up like he's supposed to be speaking, then they took it down. But I've a lot of what he writes about in his farm has really impacted the way I conceptualize Yiddishkeit and my relationship with a bunch of different things. One of his farm, he has it's Zrio Binyan B'Chinuch. He basically breaks it down to there being two parts to Chinuch. There's the Zria, which is planting, and for anybody who's ever experimented with planting actual plants, you have your dirt and you have your seed, and you plant it and you water it, and you have no idea how it's going to go. It's like sometimes the plant will get there, and sometimes it won't. So I think if you want to put it into that framework, the modeling aspect of it is kind of the zriya. It's like you have to put it out there. You have to show what's important, and whatever the kid is going to take of it, they're going to take of it. You also have to set up an environment in which that kind of growth can take place. Like before any kid is going to want to model any particular behavior that their parent is putting out there, there has to be a relationship in place that makes the kid feel like, okay, my father is somebody that I want to emulate. My father is somebody that I want to be like. And on whatever level of success you're going to have with that relationship is going, I'm not going to, it's obviously it's not foolproof, but you're going to create an environment which can allow that to happen more easily. So that's I think in terms of the modeling. Then there's also the other aspect which Revolta talks about, which is binyan. Binyan is building. So like if you've ever, I kind of dabble in woodwork here and there. It's like a private project. I will tell you that if you take a piece of wood and you put it in the ground, it's not going anywhere.
Right. That's
happening. You have to
right.
take one piece of wood, you have to put it together, you have to use the nails, you have to create a structure. You can't just hope that a structure grows.
Yeah.
By nature, structure is not something which can exist in and of itself. Right? Like
it has to be held up.
Right, it has to be held up. You have to put in place something like that. So like the way I kind of look at the perfect melding of these two concepts. You know what a bonsai tree is?
A what?
So a bonsai tree. A bonsai tree, I believe it's a Japanese art form, where you take like a little sapling and you let it grow a certain amount, but then you tie it. So, well, you can make it into all sorts of shapes, but at the end of the day, you have like a tree which it goes one way, then it bends the other way, then it bends the other way. So you have it's growing, but it's growing within a structure. So you want to put into the point of modeling behaviors is to show a child this is the appropriate behavior to take on. This is the way this is what should be done. But if you're not creating a structure to allow that to happen, it's less likely that it's actually going to take.
Okay, so I really liked your answer because it's a very balanced answer, and I like balanced things. I find, and I'm just gonna mention this also because one of the respondents on my LinkedIn post wanted to know about a Torah hashkafa that relates to parenting, and you just answered that question. I'm going to mention as well that when I ask Gedolim questions on chinuch, generally I find that the bigger the gadol, like the closer I get to Torah, the more nuanced the answer will be, and the more balanced. And that's what you just did as well. Obviously in a LinkedIn post, you're not going to get a full answer like you just said. And, it's how both parts are necessary and both parts are very, very major contributing factors to the growth of any child. Obviously nothing is guaranteed, but in a general sense. They say if you're from the people that talk in shul and you shushka your kid, then he'll grow up doing the same thing. Talking in shul and shushking his kid. So, that's obviously a very big component. Okay. So I obviously, we've seen people that say, oh, you can't like really tell them anything. You just more or less want to set them up for success. And that's obviously not true. Of course, modeling is a very big thing. And if you're doing one thing and teaching your kid another thing, you're going to have a very hard time teaching that to them. It could be that if you struggle with a certain area, meaning you want to be a certain way and it's hard for you and you struggle with that, that might be something you can give over to your child because it's not inconsistent with who you are. It's just a struggle that you have. It might be easier for him to accomplish that than what you're doing. But 100%, we need to teach and we need to model. Now the question is, what does teaching look like, right? So that's something that parents struggle with all the time. They think that it means that they need to create the perfect child right here and right now. And of course, we all know that that's not true. It's a long-term process. It goes over many years. We want to train them. We're not, and it's not about what everybody thinks is good, etc. Okay, so let me ask you like this. We can't obviously do a whole parenting session right now, but what is this was one of the questions on the post. What is the biggest mistake that parents make? Now, generally, when you think of a general thing that keeps on coming up in your practice again and again, what is something you wish everybody could know to do differently?
So I think, and this is not just with parents, by the way, I think that this is also true with couples and with people in general and how they relate to themselves and to life. I think that the single, or I'm not going to say the single, one of the most single important mistakes that people tend to make is that they make assumptions about how things are supposed to be, and they go in with certain expectations. So like, and then they feel then they feel all bad because those assumptions play out to be not true, and they feel bad because those expectations don't play out. So like,
Excellent.
let's. I think it's much easier to put it in context of a couple, because I think it's just much clearer. You have two people who grow up, and let's say just for argument's sake, they're both 20 years old when they get married, and so they have 20 years worth of experiences with two completely separate families, and they both have certain assumptions, whether they're conscious or not, about how a marriage is supposed to work.
Right.
And it's so, and these things are just so ingrained in them that it's not even a topic of conversation. Like, they talk about there's like the spectrum of knowledge. There are certain things which I don't know that I don't know.
Right,
and that's like the lowest level of knowledge, because it's not even something that I bothered to question. I'm just like, okay, this is just what it is. Like, it's an assumption.
Right. And everyone's like that, I think.
Of course. That's the way we live. We go through our daily lives based on assumptions about how things are going to work out and expectations of what's going to happen when they do work out that way.
Beautiful. So,
and then they get married, and those two sets of assumptions, the whole bubble pops. And okay, it's a little less dramatic than that, hopefully, in a good situation where they're like, oh, okay, I realize that I was thinking this and you're thinking that. Let's talk about it. But at the end of the day, that's what comes in. And I think with parents, that's very much the same idea, whether it's messaging that they got from their own parents or messaging that they got from their own personal sets of hashkafas, which have developed over the years, about what your role is as a parent, what your role is as somebody who's raising the next generation of Klal Yisrael, and what your child's role is, and what you need to expect from your child. These kinds of expectations really set the stage for a lot of conflict, because there's an old line I once heard, which I think is a really great line. The one plan that's not going to work is the one you have. So, and it's very true. It's like you can have all sorts of expectations, but if you're actually treating them as expectations, prepare to be disappointed. You can have hopes, sure.
100%. 100%. I mean, a lot of what I'll just give a shout out to you over here. I think this is why you started getting very into you do now couples therapy before they're married, right?
Yeah.
You're busy with that now, right? Trying to get help for the people when they're engaged or dating, so that they actually avoid a lot of these problems. Is that correct?
Actually, that expectation assumption thing is a big part of what we talk about. We help them to actually, when I'm sitting with a couple, an engaged couple, and it's the cutest thing. It's very nice to sit with them. But there's part of the program is like, okay, what assumptions do you have? What assumptions do you think she has? What expectations do you have? What expectations she has? Now share notes, compare, see if you're on the same page. And sometimes they are, and sometimes not.
100%. And I'll tell you also, like what I do, let's say in my parent coaching is exactly this. I mean, I start off, and what you mentioned, like with the assumptions that you don't even know you have. And I'll tell parents, the fact that you're getting frustrated when your child does something a second time means that you assume that it shouldn't happen a second time. Let's talk about that. Now, before I mention that, they wouldn't even realize that. They would think, like, if you would ask them, do you expect your child to be perfect? No, they, of course not. Who expects their child to be perfect? But then when they're getting frustrated, when the same thing that happened yesterday happens again today, and you're like, why are you getting frustrated? You know he's not perfect. Oh, because deep inside, there is that assumption. There is that feeling that this is not how it should be. There is that, that expectation that's not a proper expectation. There's that assumption about how things are supposed to be and how things, and that brings a lot of times to a worry. Is everything okay? Is it not okay? Do I have a real problem here? Do I not?
Yeah.
And that's also like what, one of the questions that we had was also, what's the biggest unnecessary worry of parents? I'm going to imagine that you would answer the same thing, right? The worry that when something, when it's based off of my assumptions and my expectations and they're off, then I get worried about my child. Is he good? Is he not good? Does he need intervention? Does he not need intervention? And that would really be an unnecessary worry, would that not?
I don't know if I would call it an unnecessary worry. And quite honestly, I'm not sure if I agree with the premise of the questions. I don't think that there are unnecessary worries. I think that worries in and of themselves, like there's a reason for them. Like and this may sound funny, but I'd rather a parent worry more about, am I doing enough for my child, or does my child need more help, than like say like, it's all good. I think that I would rather have them worrying more.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of an unnecessary worry, like if a parent has gone through, like has done the research and has like noted like, okay, these are the challenges that my child is facing, and like really with all honesty, which is a big part of it, really being honest about what you're seeing in your kid. If a parent has taken the time to really be honest about what they're seeing in their kid, has gone through what the specific challenges are, and still feels worried after having come to the conclusion clinically that, okay, this is normal, then, okay, that might be an unnecessary worry. But I think initially there's no such thing as an unnecessary worry. It's really it's a matter of keeping your eyes open and paying attention to what your child is doing and what your child is experiencing and what your child needs. And if you're doing that and you're still worried, then okay, maybe there's something else to talk about.
Okay, so let's take this up a drop, because what I find is, and I'm dealing with parents that are younger parents. Okay, so let's say I'm dealing with a parent that their oldest child is 4.5 years old, let's say, and I'm to give out a regular case, and they're worried. They're worried and they're concerned. And why are they worried and they're concerned? Because their child is tantruming all day, every day. And they look at other kids that age. They look at their neighbors' kids. They look at, the kids in school, let's say. And they say, we don't see that happening. Something is wrong here. Something's not right. There's a concern over here. Now, a lot of times what happens is that their worry and their concern that they have is not really, there's not like a real problem here. Yes, they do need guidance on how to deal with it, but there's not like a real issue that this child has something, chemically wrong with them, or, that they need like a serious intervention. Rather, they just need guidance on how to deal with the child. The problem becomes, and I'm going to, get into a couple of topics over here at once, more or less. The problem becomes when they have, like we said before, assumptions of how things should be, which a lot of times comes from looking at the neighbors, reading an article in the paper that you feel like you can't own up to, right? Because they show you, oh, you should do this and this, and they do this and this, and the reality does not look like the beautiful thing that was written in the paper. And that causes a tremendous anxiety. That causes I don't mean a clinical anxiety, I mean a tremendous worry. And that worry causes frustration, right? It snowballs, that it continues to go. So what I do with parents when I work with them is I try to get them to calm down. Let's take a deep breath. Okay, your child is normal. You don't see the neighbor's kids doing that. You're right, but I've worked with the neighbors, and I'm telling you, your child is normal. Maybe not your neighbors, but like this is a normal thing. We project very perfect homes, but that's not really the case. So it's very normal. Yes, we're gonna have to get guidance and what to think and what to feel, and that's gonna help us be able to deal with this. But at the end of the day, there's also childhood. Childhood is not perfect. Neither is adulthood, quite honestly, and
Yep.
and we're gonna, and it's gonna be fine. So that's why this wasn't my question. This is one of the questions on the post, but I believe that it is a very big thing to help parents, especially younger parents, especially younger mothers, I should say, calm down.
Yep.
It's okay.
Yep.
We
Yep.
don't need to worry so much.
Right.
Now, if there is something that's concerning you, you see something that you're not sure if it's a problem or not, ask. 100% ask. But don't get so bent out of shape and say, oh no, my kid's going to be a who knows what. Most of the time, when we're dealing with younger children, it's a matter of guidance. When a
Yeah.
child gets older, it's a different story, and they're still doing certain behaviors or whatever. There's still different things that are concerning you. That might be a much bigger indicator. But very,
Yeah.
very often, it's just a matter of guidance when they're younger. What do you think about that?
So I like what you're saying, and I want to hone in on what you said about about talking about whether kids are normal or not. I had this bumper sticker. It's probably the best $3 I ever spent. It said, "Normal people worry me," and
That's good.
it stuck with me. It just stuck with me. It's like you think about it, just like statistically speaking, how many people are actually exactly average? Very, very few. But it's like you got the bell curve, and only the people who are like right smack in the middle are actually average. Everyone else
Yeah.
is off somehow. So the question that we're asking ourselves as parents and as people who are supporting parents shouldn't be, is my kid normal? I think the question really should be, what are the challenges that my child is facing right now? What are the challenges that I myself am facing in supporting my child? And what can we do to address those challenges? It's not a matter of
100%.
now, I think that there is definitely, obviously, there's a space for if you're seeing that the challenges are just way beyond the, I guess, standard acceptable parameters of basic health. Like obviously, there needs to be more intervention, but
Right.
for most of the time, it's really just a matter of figuring out, like, okay, these are the challenges, these are my challenges, and again, being honest about what those challenges really are. Like if you have a 2-year-old who's waking up in the middle of the night, that's not abnormal. That's not something to flip out about. Um,
And
if you
even
have
if they're going down to the fridge and helping themselves to food and coming back up, that's all. It's all just happened. It's great.
Well, I mean, that's pretty advanced for a 2-year-old, so I might be very curious about that. But yeah, and on the flip side, you want to get to the upper edge. Like, if you have a teenager who's moody, that in and of itself is not necessarily something to be horribly alarmed about. You want to be able to come back to what we said before. You want to be able to create a relationship of openness and trust and safety with your kid, so that when the kid is 3, they'll come to you with their boo-boos, and when the kid is 15, they'll come to you with whatever stuff is going
Those
on there.
right, right,
But
100%.
it's all about being honest about what the challenges really are.
So taking that right, I think we're both saying that is that we want to address whatever the concerns are. Yes, get the guidance for that, learn how to deal with that, but don't like be completely flipping out about the
Mhm.
fact that you have to deal with some things with your child. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's what, that's what's normal. That's what everyone has. But I think, and I think we mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, is that parents very often have unrealistic expectations, whether that comes from the neighbors, whether that comes from the newspapers, wherever that comes from, whether it comes from social media, whatever it is. But they almost envision a life of perfection with their children. So one of the questions that we got over here was, how can parents help themselves not to get influenced like that? Actually, I don't even know if that's what the person meant by asking the question, but that's how we'll ask it. How can how we are creatures, we are social creatures, like we are people that care about the opinions of everyone else. So how do we help ourselves to have that confidence to be able to say, like, I know everything's okay, like I'm gonna do what I need to do, but I'm gonna do it calmly, and I'm not gonna feel like my life has to be on the front page of a magazine.
So I think, okay. So let's take this back a second. I think the first question to ask is, where are these expectations coming from? Where are these assumptions actually coming from? Um, and again, this is all based on a person actually being able to be honest with themselves. about these things, because very often, if you're just looking at a surface level of it, you can have a parent who wants their kid to do A, B, and C, and they're not, and saying like, well, I really just want them to do this because it's good for them. And quite honestly, that might not be wrong. It might be good for them, but the real motivating factor is because they want to look a certain way. So once you acknowledge where it's really coming from, most of the time people are able to kind of move away from it, because they say like, oh, I'm not really doing this for my kid. I'm doing this because I want to feel good about myself, or I want to feel good about my kid, or I want to present a more functional face to the world than I really feel like I am. Once parents acknowledge that it's really more about themselves than about the child's best interests, very often they're able to step back from it.
So the knowledge
Because
itself is power. That's great.
yeah,
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah. The knowledge itself is power, and then you'll come to a point where maybe the parent is not able to step back. Like, okay, I get that I'm really just doing this for my own good, but I just feel like I'm still bothered by it. So with that, it becomes the parent's problem and not the kid's problem. And if there's some real self-awareness and honesty, then the parent would be willing to seek whatever help it is that they need, whether it's going to therapy or however else they want to deal with it, to be able to help them to feel okay with not presenting that to the rest of the world. You know, the same way
Right.
that somebody might. It's so interesting to me, because it's like maybe the medium has changed over the years. You know, like instead of
Okay.
it being keeping up with the Joneses and the next door neighbors, these days, like a lot of people see on WhatsApp status, or if they're on other social
Right.
media, they'll see it there. And there is this pressure to put on a certain face for the world. But if we're able to identify it, if we're able to notice what it really is,
Right.
and to allow ourselves to work through that, we end up in a better shape, not just for our kids, but for ourselves too. We feel just happier
100%.
that we don't have to perform like that.
Right. 100%. The common theme I hear from the parents that I work with is that I don't feel like my kids change. I feel like I changed. And I'm like, that's great. That's
Yep.
exactly what we want.
Yep.
So speaking of which, so I think like now, we've given parents a tremendous amount of assets, right? We told them that if they're real with themselves, they're able to lower their concerns, they're able to lower their worries, and they'll get guidance on how to deal with specific things, but there's no reason to go, completely crazy out of it. So now let me ask you like this. If we've set them up for success like this, will that help us minimize the amount of people that will actually need therapy, that will actually need actual intervention? And a question
Potentially.
that we got on the post was, has therapy gotten a little bit out of hand? Like, do we use it too much?
So I saw that. And I'll tell you a story that I heard from a friend of mine. This guy has a teenage daughter, and he told me, he knows I'm a therapist, and he told me that one day his daughter says, I want to go to therapy. Like, she'd been in therapy before to deal with whatever specific issues it was. Um, and she had graduated and she was done, and that was that. And she says, yeah, I want to go back to therapy. And he was a little surprised, because it was kind of like really out of the blue. And he asked her, like, well, why do you want to go back to therapy? If it's something, if he needs help with something, we're glad to help you with it. I'm just wondering what's going on. And she says, well, all the girls at the lunch table are sitting around talking about their therapists, and I feel left out. So like, it's interesting, because I think to an extent, everybody, okay, public disclaimer here, I feel like everybody could use somebody to talk to. Everybody in the world needs somebody that they can talk to, and somebody that they can know is a safe person for them to talk to, and who will hear what they have to say without judgment. When the mission says "Kanei l'cha chaver," yeah. So I've heard it suggested that that's talking about get a therapist. I've heard it suggested.
Well, as I'll say that daigo belev ish, when there's a worry in the heart of a man,
Mhm.
you should tell it
Yep.
over to others. There's
Yep.
nothing else in it. Just tell it over. Telling it over in itself is a tremendous thing. It's a chazal.
It is. It's very true. It's very true. And I have like a whole there's a reason why that works, by the way, which I can go into if you want. But to come back to the first question, like
Yeah.
I think that therapy in and of itself, I don't think it's overdone per se. I think that there's definitely a chance that it could be overdone. Um, I think that part of that is part of the responsibility for making sure that it does not get overdone is on consumers. Part of it, the responsibility for making sure that it doesn't get overdone, is on therapists. There have been clients that I've worked with where I've said, looks like we're kind of done with what you originally came in for. What's our plan for going forward? And there are clients who have said, you know what, you're right. We did get to where I wanted to be, and I'm good. And Hatzlacha Rabba.
That's it. Right. Right.
And that's it. And that's a beautiful thing. There's no reason that therapy should have to drag out any longer than it needs to.
Right.
Right. And again, there's another story that I heard, which is maybe an extreme example of it, but there are some people who conceptualize therapy this way. There's a famous actor who was interviewed about his experience with therapy, and he said that he's had the same therapist for 21 years, which, like, for myself, I'm listening to this and like, who in the world is this guy seeing for 21 years, and what are they talking about for 21 years? And over the rest of the course of the interview, it came out that he was really this therapist had really taken on more of a coaching role, which, like
a friend, like a good outside friend.
Well, not even a friend, but somebody who can, like, okay, I'm non-judgmental. I'm not putting myself into the room. This is a space where you can be here and you can hear a different perspective on what you are going through without having to worry about, like, other stuff getting mixed in, which, like, as I said, it's an extreme example, but if that's the way a person wants to do it and a person has the money to maintain that kind of thing and it's not disrupting his life and it's helping his life,
then that's great.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think I think that it is possible. I've heard this as a supervisor, talking to other therapists who say, like, okay, well, my client does not need to be here anymore, but there are third parties which are saying, no, he does have to be here. Like, that is
a different story.
And there are all sorts of different, like, moving pieces which contribute to that. So even if, clinically speaking, this particular child does not need to be in therapy, it could be that there are other things happening that make it that this child being in therapy makes those things go smoother.
Right, 100%. There's always a full picture.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a very good answer. Let me ask you the last question. What was your either most challenging client or biggest transformation in a client that you've seen? I mean, I can imagine if you were successful with your most challenging client, that would have been the biggest transformation. Sometimes not. Let me hear.
So I saw that, and I was worried that you were going to ask that because it's so hard to pick out, like, one.
Okay, so let's change it a little bit. Is there any time that stands out by you as a wow moment? Like, you worked with this client, and I have, let's say, clients that came to me initially hesitant, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, you're doing magic, right? So that's like a little bit of a wow moment, that you have that success, you taste that success, you feel that, and you like think Hashem that you're in this field where you're helping other people. Can you include us in one of those moments?
Okay, so I'll tell you, there was this, when I was first working in a clinic, there was this person there's no chance that this client is listening to this podcast at all, but just in the interest of maintaining confidentiality, I'm changing some of the major details. There's this person who I was working with who had gone through a horrible family background, abuse and really just emotional abuse, verbal abuse, being put down, very complicated family dynamics, parentified, horrible stuff. And this person was always very hard on himself, very hard on himself, to the point where he was saying, like, I can't do anything, I can't get anything done. And I said to the person, well, let's how do you look at yourself right now? And he said, well, I just look at myself as this person who can't get anything done, who can't be effective, who can't accomplish. And I said, can I present a different perspective to you? And he says, yeah, sure, go ahead. Like I said, I'm looking right now at a person who, even though there was this horrible family dynamic, even though there was verbal and emotional abuse, even though there was parentification and responsibilities and obligation. You're a person who managed to put yourself through high school, put yourself through college, and write a book. And that says to me that there's a lot of inner strength there. And this client looks at me. He's like, I never thought about it like that.
Wow.
I never thought about it like that. And
wow.
There was a shift. There was like such a shift from looking at himself as a person who is incapable, because that's what he'd been told by everyone who he put on a pedestal in his life, who was incapable, who was unable to get anything done, and who was always just playing catch up with life in general, to looking at himself as a person who has strength and is able to navigate life and is able to be effective in the face of horrible adversity.
Wow.
And like, and this moment happened. I think I'd been working for about 2 years at that point, and
wow, I really knew.
And it was just and it wasn't really a matter of like using any one particular modality or using any one particular technique. It was a matter of being a human in a room with another human being and saying, you're not seeing the whole picture.
Wow.
Or you're seeing the picture from the back.
Right.
And you're not
100%. That's what it is so often. That's an amazing story. And thank you so much, Yeshaya Kraus LCSW, for joining me today. I think this was a very informative interview. I hope that everyone watching it will, take out so much from it that will help them in their parenting and their lives in general. They will learn to be honest with themselves. They will learn to not be overly worried about things that are going on, but yes, to get the guidance and help for them. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure doing it. We got to do this again sometime. We got to.
Sure.
Before.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought podcast. I truly hope that this episode has been beneficial for you in your parenting. Please let me know either in the comments or by sending me an email at Boruch, that's BORUCH, at bmaparenting.com. Have a wonderful day.